Isquis Chichewasket, Pamela Barnes. It's my honor today to formally welcome you to the Syilx territory. And so before I do that, I want to share with you a little bit about what our lands mean to us. In this part of Turtle Island, which is how we refer to North America, the sharing of our lands with peoples from other places is fairly recent. It's about 200 years. Where other parts of Turtle Island, that history goes back 500 years, 1,000 years, depending on where you're speaking of. But here it's fairly recent. And with those coming together of different peoples from different places, came some new ideas about human relationship to the land, and that are very different from our traditional viewpoint about our relationship to the lands. And so one of those concepts is the idea of ownership, human ownership of land. And we as Syilx people see ourselves more of borrowing these lands from our great-great-great-great-grandchildren. We look at things in 7 generations. And there's a very big difference between those two ideas. So if I own this necklace, I can sell it, I can trade it, I can give it away. It's mine, I can do what I want. It's up to me how I choose to care for it. I can take great care, or I can toss it aside. Again, it's mine. I can do what I want with it. If I borrow this necklace, everything changes in those relationships. I cannot sell it. I cannot trade it. I cannot give it away. And there's an expectation that I take the very best care possible. And when I leave it or return it, that at least it's in the same condition I found it in, and if at all possible, in better. So those ideas are very different. And it's with that understanding of our relationship to these lands that we first welcomed people to the traditional unceded territory of the Syilx people. And so it's with that understanding that today I welcome you to the traditional unceded and currently occupied territory of the Syilx people, with the gentle reminder that none of us, including ourselves as Syilx people, are taking the very best care possible of these lands for all of our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and so on and so forth. Limnet.
So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Victoria Verge. I'm the Education Coordinator of Adult Programs here at the Kelowna Art Gallery. And on behalf of the Board of Directors and staff, I would like to thank you all so much for joining us. And I'll begin this evening's talk by acknowledging that the land on which the gallery stands is the unceded traditional territory of the Okanagan Syilx people. Now, today the Art Gallery is pleased to welcome featured artist Gary Pearson, whose work is presented in our current permanent collection exhibition a year from now. He's joining us from his studio today, where we will get the chance to peek behind the scenes as he gives us a brief tour and chat in his Okanagan studio space, and possibly get to learn about some current works in progress. A little bit about Gary before we get things started. He was born in Melfort, Saskatchewan, grew up in Prince George, BC. He received a BFA from the University of Victoria and an MFA from the University of Saskatchewan. He has lived and worked in Kelowna since 1991 and has taught at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan campus. becoming a professor emeritus in 2018. Pearson has an active exhibition record, both in Canada and abroad. He has also curated exhibitions and written many reviews and articles, and was inducted into the Royal Canadian Academy of Arts in 2008. So just a few housekeeping rules before I hand it over to Gary. Please remember to save your questions until near the end of the lecture this evening. There will be a 10 to 15 minute Q&A period where we'll have the chance to get to all of your questions then. It's also important to note that today's lecture is being recorded and it will be available on our website for future viewing. If anybody happens to miss it, they can certainly check it out at a later date. All right, well, thank you everybody, and I hope you enjoy the talk. Gary, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Victoria, and thanks to the Kelowna Art Gallery for inviting me to participate in the Artist Talk series tied to the Year From Now exhibition guest curated by Wanda Locke. And I've got 3 monoprints in the exhibition, which I should just, before going there, I should say that I will talk a little bit about the 3 monoprints and the larger suite of prints numbering 27 called the Ashtray series. And then move into a couple of shots, one exterior shot of my studio here in the north end of Kelowna, and an interior shot. I was going to do a kind of a iPad camera video 360-degree look at my studio, but I've decided just to go with a single shot to give you an idea of my workplace. And then because it should be quite straightforward, 2019, 2020 were very productive years for me. And I know the pandemic put a curtail on a lot of activities, we all know, but I actually found it not unusually conducive to working in my studio because I'm active here all the time. But I had an exhibition approaching in 2021 at Gallery Jones in Vancouver. So there was an extra incentive, if you want, to work, a little bit more productively than I might on average do. So what I thought I would do is actually show images from the Gallery Jones exhibition, as well as some supporting images that give a background to how certain paintings transpired. And if you'll bear with me, then I'll just start with the exterior shot of this is actually a shot from an install shot from the show that's currently up at the Kelowna Art Gallery. And the 3 monoprints that are in the vitrine are from, I think, 1995. And they're not large, maybe, I don't know, 15 by 12 inches or so. And they're all, I'll show the series in total in a minute, but they're oil on paper. And basically I worked off a sheet of plexiglass, or a few sheets of plexiglass, printing throughout a day really at the university. And Liz Wiley, who was the curator for many years, purchased these works on behalf of the Kelowna Art Gallery in, I think, 2009 or 2010, and they became part of the permanent collection at that point. This work, a painting you can partially seen in the background, is actually a painting by Vicki Marshall, which is part of the collection as well.
Sorry, Gary, I'll interrupt you for a second there. I think you'll just have to click on the screen share. We're not able to see your images just yet.
Oh, is that right? Okay, sorry.
No, all good.
Does that work?
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Perfect. Looks good.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm just a bit of a Neanderthal when it comes to the computers. But anyway, I gave you an introduction to these three prints, and I'll move on to this shot, which is actually an install shot as well. The Kelowna Art Gallery had a a recent acquisitions exhibition in 2010, and Liz Wiley, then curator, decided, because personally I prefer the works glazed, not necessarily framed. They could be glazed and just put on the wall with some nails or something. But in any case, they were hung unframed, so you see some of the paper curling and so on. But it was a nice presentation. It was 27 in total, and the truth is, although I'm not a printmaker by nature, I do monoprints, of which this is a perfect example. And in this case, I didn't have any preparatory sketches. I just thought of still lives, and the ashtray series is pretty much in that vein. But I also work in copper plate engraving, and well, I'm currently working on a pandemic series in woodcuts, actually. But it's typically what I do is either do work in print making from scratch, or I'll take failed paintings that are beyond repair, really, and either print, do a monoprint from them, or cut sections out and do, ink them up and put them through the press and do a monoprint version. So it's very quite a generative process for me because of my love of drawing and, of course, painting. So that's the backstory of this series. So I live in the north end of Kelowna on the west-facing side of Knox Mountain, and that's an exterior view of my studio. And you can see Okanagan Lake off to your right. And as I'm not doing a walk around with the camera, I'll just show you one exterior shot of my workplace. And the table that you can see a portion of on the right corner is my drawing table, easel in the back, and so on. And the painting you'll see just to the left of the paint easel trolley is called The Journal, and it was a featured work at Gallery Jones, insofar as it took, premier look place in the exhibition entrance area. And I also titled the show called The Journal Selected Works, because even though the works, there's a couple from 2015 that I'll show you in a minute, but largely the works are from 2019 and 2020. And although, as I typically work with thematic ideas, so I can come up with a title fairly quickly, in 2019-20, it was basically a one-off kind of painting, endeavor. So I just decided to call the show Selected Works. And the image, whatever that is off to the left, is part of a little gallery adjacent to the main space at Gallery Jones, where they show a selection of work, or it could be a mini show by another artist or whatever. I don't know quite whose work that is, but the painting in the center screen is called The Piano. And it was, it's based on a photograph I just cut out of a newspaper, because during the 2020 pandemic period, all the clubs and cabarets and concert halls and everything else were closed, among many other things. And this particular article featuring an image not unlike this, really spoke to the kind of isolation and the dormancy, if you want, of culture and nightlife. So I decided to do a painting of the grand piano in an empty concert hall. This is 46 by 42 inches, all on canvas. And I just made up the backdrop because just needed something to enliven I know the scene was very empty and, of little interest if you want, but I thought I would animate it a bit by the kind of line drawing, which I've done in the background. This is a work from 2015. It's part of my fountain series. And the Gallery Jones had this particular work and another fountain series painting of the same size in storage, plus a couple of other smaller pieces. And Shane and Anita wanted to put this fountain painting called the Bird Fountain in with my recent works, even though it was done in 2015. There's a larger picture of it. It's actually about, I would guess 96 by 160 inches in size, and it's oil on canvas. It's actually, along with a lot of other fountain drawings and canvases, inspired by work I did in Mexico in 2015, I guess. And basically what I did is, when I was sketching, as I always do, when I'm there or elsewhere, and not knowing this time what the outcome would be, after doing maybe 30 drawings, I realized that I'd drawn more fountains than any other subject matter. So I decided at that point that I would do a fountain series. So the paintings, of course, were done back in my studio. There's a detail. Excuse me, another detail. So a lot of line, a lot of color that's invented, but the premier subject matter, the fountain, is fairly close to that which I observed, and I just made up the background to some degree, based on composite images that I had, and populated the foreground with birds and more detailed vegetation. This is another shot of the install at the Gallery Jones. So primarily, with the exception of the two big fountain paintings, the second one you'll see in a bit, the paintings that I exhibited were 46 by 42 inch or 42 by 46. And this is called The Balcony. It's from 2020, oil on canvas. And it's basically kind of a neat, I'm influenced by expressionist art, like Kirchner and Grotz and Max Beckmann and others from the Weimar period. And I do, it's certainly all modernist, early modernist painting, Matisse and Picasso and others. I worked with really flat picture plane. So what I've done is tipped up the background to the two figures in the bubble there to, flatten the picture space or picture plane. And I'll show you the image that this painting is derived from here. And it's a photograph of two friends of mine in Hamburg. And you can see there's a line of buildings in the boulevard area in the center of the two opposing streets. What I've done essentially is substituted the towers or the residential towers for the trees, and cropped off to my left some of the older architecture to end up with this. But what I was struck by, this photograph I actually took in 2012, but going through some archival photographs and that, I was struck by the gaze of the two protagonists there, and it seemed like a pandemic kind of picture to me, insofar as I imagined they were looking at somebody on a balcony that was ready to jump off, or maybe had already jumped off. So it has a bit of, the mystery of the undescribed taking place in that picture. But I thought about it as a kind of trauma picture, which may or may not be communicated. I'm not sure, but that was my idea behind it. There's another install shot. The Mystic Fountain off to the right and Waiting on my left. And that's a full shot of Waiting. And basically this is derived from, a number of drawings I did at the Cézanne house in Aix-en-Provence in south of France. And there was nobody sitting. There was actually more of a picnic table out on the terrace. But I just ignored that in my drawings and did the tile work and some of the trees and shrubs in the background. In my studio last year, I decided to put a man there with, two glasses of wine, one unfilled and the other filled, and decided to call it Waiting. And it was basically, again, one of these, shall we say, displaced narrative, or a narrative of displaced persons. So someone, in my drawings, I put something like, how long should I wait? It's, it's now 4:40 in the afternoon or something. So it was more of a narrative, but I just decided to, leave the text out and go with the painting on the canvas work. And another install shot. This one is called The Pianist and the Winged Angel, and the full title is The Pianist and the Winged Angel for SR. And SR is actually Susan Rothenberg, who passed away last year in 2020. I haven't fully got the cause of death, but she was certainly one of my big inspirations from an artistic standpoint. And I have met her on a couple of occasions and written about her as well. And after learning that she passed away, and because I just reviewed a show of hers in New York, to be honest with you, and one of the paintings that I spoke quite lengthily about was a painting of a pianist with an absent piano, because it was like a woman pianist, but there was no piano keys or anything in front of her. And so I decided to do a tribute painting like this here. And rather than look for subject matter for some kind of, memorial painting, I decided that a piano player would be the right way to go. And as I've done paintings of drawings of angels in the past, based on, statuary and things I've seen in my travels, I just went to some studies that I'd previously done and pulled up an image of an angel and placed that, off to the right. These are two drawings, actually. The one on the left is ink on paper. And I'll just go to another slide. Oh, let's go back. Both these drawings are about theatricality. And the one on the left, Happy End. Happy End is actually a title of a play written by Bertolt Brecht. And it's part of the cabaret repertoire of Brecht and Eisler and Kurt Weill. I'm a big fan of the Weimar period, so as you might have got by now. But I was in Mexico City in 2017 and was on a double-decker kind of tour bus. And, we'd stop at various places throughout the city, and just so people could stretch their legs or get, some soda pop or whatever. And as it happened, we stopped at this one place, and there was a street tour or mime group, and, like a troupe of actors, really. And this young woman was putting on her makeup. So I asked her if I could take a picture of her, and she happily obliged. So I did. And consequently, I guess last year, 2020, hauled that photograph out and decided to do a drawing of her, which is what you see here. And it's 30 by 22 inches. The one on the right is actually ink, enamel, spray paint, and oil on paper, also the same size. And it has a bit of a theatrical background as well. There's a full image of it. The text in the background is written with graphite, actually. I didn't put that as my medium description, but it's excerpted from a article by Alban Berg, which I'll describe more thoroughly in a minute. So, in 2020, fortunately, before the international travel ban took place, my wife and I had a 2-week or even longer stay in New York City. We went to a number of concerts and operas and what have you. And one of them was a play called Wojciech, which was directed or written by Alban Berg, a German playwright. And the set design and the directorial duties was actually conducted by William Kentridge, the famous, South African artist. But interestingly, it was a tremendous play with a lot of very dramatic, because it's about totalitarianism and the kind of subjugation of working class and people and thereabouts. So when I got home, I did some research, and I have a book called Composers on Music. And as long as composers have been writing about their work, this book probably has some excerpts from all of them, including Alban Berg. And so I read, it was an article actually on his play Wojciech, and I've got the excerpt that I wrote down. I call the artwork Between the Acts an allegory. And an allegory, as you well know, describes a poem or a play or a picture that has some hidden meaning that can be revealed in the description upon which it covers. And so the section I put from Alban Berg is, I'll read it out for you here. In absolute music, no matter how rich structurally, no matter how aptly it might fit the dramatic effects, would offer, after a number of scenes so composed, inevitably create musical monotony. The effect would become positively boring with a series of a dozen or so formally composed entr'actes, which offered nothing but this type of illustrative music. Boredom, of course, is the last thing one should experience in the theater. And this is by Berg, from an article called A Word About Wojciech, from a larger article called Das Opernproblem. And basically, the theatrical kind of angle here entree act or between the acts is how we conduct our lives to a certain, to a certain degree. It's not constant, on the contrary, but it's consistent in the way we do our day-to-day living. And it's between the acts that Albenberg continues the entertainment value, the dramatic effect, and the storyline to a large degree, so as not to devolve the kind of import of the theatrical production. So Wojciech, I think, was a 3-act play, but it never really ended, like during because there was no set changes or anything. There was just some music, some activity, some minor set changes. And so you're always engaged from a spectator standpoint. That I think that really had a strong kind of correlation to how we undertake our day-to-day lives, to not fill in spaces so much as to make those spaces that are sequential with more, shall we say, engaged living, meaningful. And I can even say taking a deep breath would be an example of something, dramatic understatement, but it still has a profound effect on how we go from day to day, or hour to hour, minute to minute. This is another one that's kind of music based. It's called Nothing But a Vacant Shadow. It's 46 by 42 oil on canvas. And it's inspired by a song, actually, called Der Verflossen, or loosely translated as A Washed Up Lover, or The Washed Up Lover. And I heard the song for the first time. It's written by Bertolt Goldschmidt, and I have it on a recording I've got called Berlin Cabaret Songs by Uta Lemper with the Matrix Ensemble. And in the liner notes with the lyric transcriptions, there's the line goes on to say, and he's safe there, don't worry, no harm. His ex-lover's has been there. I'll ask you. She'll tell you that he was a fool. Next to you, he was nothing but a vacant shadow. And he always wore those horrible polka dot ties. She laughs when you see her laugh. You laugh and laugh. That sure cuts X down to size. He's a pale shadow in polka dot ties, but with no shadow glow. So basically, I'm playing the CD in my studio, and it's sung in German, but the kind of instrumentation and so on led me to read the liner notes, and I'd probably read them before, but had long forgotten. But I decided I would do a painting based on the vacant shadow idea and the ex-lover. And that's him exiting, in the middle there, out the rear door. And the woman in the foreground is the one who comes out on top, really, knowing that her lover was not much known for more than his bow ties. The painting in the right, that's on the wall, is put in there as the third party. So rather than just have the woman looking to us or out to the front and the man exiting in the rear, I thought it was too simple like a kind of counterpart dialogue. So I decided to paint a picture, portrait of a woman, as you can see there, to suggest maybe that this portrait was actually this woman who you see up front in a previous, time. I don't know. because, relationships start and they end. But perhaps my thinking was that this portrait of the woman in the painting was this woman here at a previous time. And that was my idea. But I guess more importantly, I wanted the third party in there, and it seemed logical to have that woman as well. So this one's called the Pineapple Lamp. It's an install shot from the Gallery Jones. And there's the full picture. It's a 2019 painting, and I was in Marseille in 2018, staying at wasn't a pension, it was somewhat a little bit better than that. And we managed to get a room in this accommodation that was largely reserved for family members and special guests. And as it happened, the proprietor was generous enough to give us this room, and it was just a fabulous spot. But one of the things in that room that, among many, that I was attracted to was this pineapple lamp. And it was a pineapple, of course, has the leaves growing out the top, but for whatever reason, it was inverted, and the leaves in this lamp were actually at the base of the, pineapple. So it was quite intriguing, really. I did a number of sketches of it, and did this painting, a year later, or 2 years later. No, a year later, 2019. And let's just go back. The idea is, in a painting like this, because I kind of abstracted the background and left the two principal subjects as these scenography, was to draw some attention to the idea that contemplation and close study of certain things becomes very important to one's equilibrium. It's to take time out to really engage with, even inanimate objects for some kind of interaction. And this is basically what this painting is about. It was originally going to be somewhat of a tribute to Arthur Rimbaud, who actually died in Marseille, back in 1916 or something. And that's why I put the lampshade. I made up the lampshade myself, because the one in the actual accommodation was more of a, shall we say, a roundish shape. And I made the lampshade in the painting more like a Moroccan fez hat with some kind of North African designs in it. But I decided after a point that it wasn't necessary to bring, Arthur Rimbaud into it. So I just decided to call it A Man Contemplating the Pineapple Lamp. The man on the chair in the kind of a pink underpainting, and you can see it enveloping him as well. But I left it sparingly underpainted under the chair as a direct nod to, and it's the same with the bistro table, as a direct nod to Matisse, because he often did this in his paintings, where he would paint outside the frame of a chair or Chesterfield or something like this, and leave the color that was kind of filtered into the painting in other areas, not overpainted. So it's like what they call, I forget the Italian term, pentimenti, where you have certain areas of the canvas that is left as a trace of an earlier step or stage in the painting process. But I found an excellent opportunity in the chair and the table to deal with that very directly, And also chromatically, it works well because of the kind of slightly filtered rose pink around the figure, and it's more direct exposition under the chair. And the same with the white table, where the top is, of course, white and the lights from the lamp, and then leave that underside white as well. So, like compositionally and chromatically, it worked out quite well. This is the other large fountain painting. It's actually called The Large Fountain, and it's based on a photograph I took in Lisbon, I think in 2016. And it was, it was a massive fountain. I was just struck by the scale of it. And this is give you a better example of its size. It's again about 96 by 160 inches, oil on canvas. There's a detail, or not a detail, I should say, the full image. So pretty much what I saw from the photograph is presented in the canvas, although I turned the figures in the middle ground into like more or less stick figures and gave a more direct representation of the young couple in the lower left foreground. In the tree on the right, unfortunately, I didn't put a photograph of that photograph in my slideshow, but the tree on the right was actually in foliage. But I decided after a point, although I did try putting leaves on it, it didn't work. So I, overpainted them and just went with a bare, shall we say, branched tree, and got into a very active line drawing there, not totally concentrating on how well it was conducted or how one part related to another. It was more of a gesture drawing. And the reason I did that was to counter the kind of leitmotif of the fountain base, and to counter the lack of linearity in the other foliage areas in the mid-ground. So the line itself, being as dramatic as it is, really pulls that tree closer to the picture plane, and it's the thinking behind that. I think that's the end of my slideshow. How did I work out for time?
I think it worked out quite well. We're at 6:40, so we've got lots of time for questions here. If anybody has any, welcome to type them into the chat bar. Let me just change my view here. There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Gary. That was very informative and really great to get a sense of your work on a bigger scale, and to see what you've been doing quite recently. 2019, 2020, very active by the looks of things. Yeah.
Well, I didn't show all the works in the exhibition, so there was more there as well. They did a good job of the install.
Yeah, it looks like a very well laid out exhibition. Beautiful. Yeah. Oh, we've got some questions rolling in already. All right. Wonderful. Okay, so I'll just dive right in. So our first question here comes from Philip, and they're asking what your favorite place that you traveled to was.
Well, it's a hard question to ask, actually. I'll be, go on the limb here and say Ghana, West Africa. And I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd get to Africa as much as I wanted to. But in 2001, One, I believe, was part of I was co-producer on a documentary on rural healthcare in Ghana. It was funded by the Canadian International Development Agency and co-partnered with my colleagues at Okanagan University College, which preceded UBC Okanagan. So Jenny Tucker, who's the other producer, and I went over to Ghana as on a research / reconnaissance trip, and went from Accra right up to the Burkina Faso border, and off to the left and off to the right, and got to meet some of the principal actors in the healthcare industry. And then we came back to Kelowna. I got my crew together, and we went back, and we for about close to a month. And we had a driver, of course, and got to see a fascinating country and meet some wonderful, wonderful people in a part of the world that was as foreign to me as any country could be. So I'd have to say straight off that I guess one of my most fascinating travels abroad was to Ghana and West Africa.
Oh, sounds like an incredible experience. Lots of questions coming in. Wonderful to see. So our next question is from Emily, and she's asking, did the girl, the performer you painted in Happy End, know you painted her now?
The girl in Happy End.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my Spanish is pretty limited, but I was able to, at least ask that question of her if she would mind me photographing her, and she had no problem with it. And I have no way of contacting her or anything else. So, I mean, it was just one of those, happenstance moments where you take advantage of the subject matter and go with that. And I think she was quite open to that. And I told her I was an artist. I wasn't, just a tourist. And so it might have made her a little bit more amenable to, letting me snap her picture or not. I don't know, but she seemed like a pleasant enough woman.
Well, it's wonderful. Would definitely be hard to track her down now.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
Mexico City's got about, 30 million people or something living there.
Yeah. Okay, so next we have Laura, and she's asking, what was the biggest painting you've ever painted?
Oh, well, the biggest drawing I ever did was called The Trees of Knox Mountain, and it was actually shown at Kelowna Art Gallery in an exhibition called The Big Picture. And it was probably 20 feet high by, I don't know, maybe 25 feet high by 60 feet wide. Wow. And it's all ink on paper. So, but no, on a canvas, probably the largest work I've ever done was maybe 200 inches high by 100 inches wide. And it was called Arthur Rimbaud in New York, the painting I did in New York in 1991, actually. So I'm still trying to sell the artwork, but no one buys it. It was one of my favorite paintings. So, yeah.
Sometimes those ones they'll find the right owner.
Well, the reality is, Arthur Rimbaud in New York, I could easily track an image down, but I used to paint in a symbolic abstraction style. And where, like everything was very cryptically kind of, shall we say, described. I knew the meanings behind many of the paintings, but the viewer was unlikely to grasp it because it was so sublimated to the abstract vocabulary. And Arthur Rimbaud in New York was actually a breakthrough painting for me in 91, where I went directly into subject matter. and it was inspired by Enzo Cucci's painting Arthur Rimbaud and Hurrah. And I saw it at the Whitney Museum, and I also saw a little bit later in '91 artwork, or I should say, a show of his graphic artwork. And I just, went back to my studio at PS1, and I thought I got to do a painting of Arthur Rimbaud. That's going to be, it was totally inspired by Cucci's painting. So, it's a bit of the backstories are everywhere. I mean, all artists have them, writers, poets, you name it. So,
yeah, never as simple as what at
No.
face value. I'll just quickly answer Mackenzie's question here. They're wondering where they can find this recording. So once tonight's talk is over, I'll save the recording and you'll be able to find it on the Kelowna Art Gallery's website under the current exhibition webpage there. So just look for a year from now on the Kelowna Art Gallery website and give it a day or two and I'll have it up there. Another question here from Evangeline. They're saying Shikoli and I was wondering who was the artist that most impacted your practice and style?
Yeah, without a doubt, it's Edvard Munch, a Norwegian artist. Everybody knows him from his Scream, for example, and Madonna and Jealousy, any variety of paintings. And he was the pioneer of expressionist art, the father of expressionist art, I guess you could say. And that's an artist whom I constantly go back to. And I was fortunate to see a big retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art in, I would guess, maybe 2014 or something like this. In all the, not all the major paintings. I've been to Oslo as well, so I've been to the Munch Museum. And, but it was just a phenomenal thrill to walk around gallery after gallery and to see, the graphic work. And he was a tremendous printmaker and drawer. And I'm very lucky because Ihor Holubisky, who was actually a curator here at the Kelowna Art Gallery for about 2 years, back in the early aughts, 2005 or 6 or something like this. And we became good friends and have remained that way for ages. But in 2007, I think, or 9, he invited me to do an exhibition at the McMaster Museum of Art in Hamilton, where he was a curator at the time. And the idea was that I would show some of my work, but also show it in companion with works in the McMaster permanent collection. So because my background is influence and inspiration is in expressionist art, they have a tremendous collection of that genre in art. And so I was able to go over many, many paperworks and photographs and, prints, drawings, personally by hand, with gloves on and the whole deal, but handling, Edvard Munch's and Otto Dix, George Grosz, and all these other fascinating artists from the turn of the century. And, you go away with something like that, it lasts you for a lifetime. I mean, it's one thing to see it behind glass at a museum. There's nothing to actually hold the paperwork in your hand and study it even with a magnifying glass, which I did. And to cut to the chase, I made a selection of works, not just of that period, but I also went into the 40s and 50s and looked at some photographs, the period of Jane Mansfield and other, Hollywood types, and found, because I divided the show into 4 different categories. One was death, one was sex, one was uh, oh, it escapes me right now, but I broke them up into kind of subject narratives. And so I was able to pull works from the permanent collection, partnered with my own works to make an exhibition that kind of looked at the human drama from a historical and a contemporary standpoint. So
Hmm.
I can always go back to Munch.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Very lucky. We've got a question here from David. He says, you've been an artist for many years. Over that time, I wonder how you put a monetary value on your paintings as the years go on. How do you put a price point on the work that you do?
Well, it's just an evolution of the work of the artist and of the price structure. And when I graduated with it's an MA actually from University of Saskatchewan. Yeah, I graduated before they got the MFA program. But at certain points, you had to, if you're in a group exhibition, and I didn't have a commercial gallery representation at that time, but in group exhibitions, you have to give value for insurance purposes. So as a student, even as an undergrad, coming out of undergraduate school, I had an exhibition in my hometown of Prince George, and they needed to have an insurance value for the works in the show. So I had to come up with a price point. And when you do that, and you keep increasing it as time goes on, as your resume builds and your works in collections, public collections particularly increase, you increase the value of your work for the marketplace. And then when you have a gallery representation, you're always in discussion with the representation about pricing. And if they think you're pricing a little bit low or a little bit high, or conversely, if the artist thinks it's too low, this is a discussion point, and then you can come up with a valuation that is responsible to the marketplace as well as to the artist's career stage. And it's common knowledge that the older the work is, depending on its level of importance in the oeuvre of the artist, that work usually commands more value. So, for instance, I said earlier, my Arthur Rimbaud in New York painting, which was a turning point for me, and one of my I'm most proud of that painting. If it ever did come up for acquisition, the purchaser would have to be prepared to pay more than current market value for current work. That's just how it works, how the pricing structure goes. So I hope that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I think pricing is something many artists or early career artists do tend to struggle with.
It's nothing to do with square inches and this sort of thing. That's just a myth that, I don't know, circulated maybe 40 years ago. But it's based on, really it's based on your resume. And until you start to build up a history of shows and that, you can price your work as high as you want, but if you have nothing to kind of argue its price point on, then it's the luck of the draw if you sell anything.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. All right, I'll move on to our next question here. Next, we've got, how many fountains did you end up sketching versus final painting? What was your process for selecting the ones to paint?
Yeah, so I did 4 of the big ones, 2 of which you've seen on the screen. And one was based on a fountain in Tequila, Mexico. And basically it was an angel fountain that had at its base some, not gargoyles, but some other kind of creatures. And what I decided to do with that one, I took the angel part and recreated the base, which there's a pedestal, there's a kind of cap on that, and the primary fountain figure, which was an angel. I kept the angel, and I changed her from kind of a, I should say, understated physical gesture into a woman who was pointing directly outwards at something. And I, at the top of the pedestal, at the statue's base, I created a fountain of good and evil. So rotating, one side said good, the other side said evil. And by implication, the two sides you didn't see had good and evil as well. And it was called the fountain of good and evil. And what is the other one? Oh, the romance, it was called. And basically, I took about 3 fountains from sketches that I've done and put them into place on a big composition, and then did a little bit of an insert with a romantic couple sitting on a bench, and with the writing called the romance at the base of it. So I did lots of sketches, and not just sketch pad size, but sketches that are 42 by 46, 48 inches big on paper, and eventually just did the 4 large canvases based on those studies. So yeah, it was a good endeavor.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Next up, we've got John, who's asking, do you have an established color palette, or is it constantly changing?
Well, I typically work in broken color. So if I'm painting with green, I always add red. If I'm painting with violet, I'll add yellow. So I'm desaturating the color a lot, through complementary mixing. And I do like black. So black is a kind of not a go-to color all the time, but I use it quite consistently because I'm very linear for the most part in my paintings. But the last few years, I've been using rose and reds. I've been using yellows, not oranges necessarily, not blues. So earth colors, and yeah, I guess yellows and rose colors and reds to a certain degree. I'm not a colorist by any means, so I'm always cautious about going out on a limb with a multiple colored palette. So I err on the more graphic side of things.
Wonderful. So I think we're getting near the end of our time, but I'll leave you with this last question from Melissa. She says, hi, Gary. When you take photos on your travels, do you take them with the intention of using them as references for your paintings, or do you go through them later and decide just a few? Also, where do you hope to travel to next, should COVID allow it?
Hi, Melissa. Yes, good question. I don't take a lot of photographs for starters. And so when I do take a photograph, typically I make the big mistake of when I go into a museum, I'm taking too many photographs. I know a lot of people are like that, and they're not selfies for me. They're actually, looking at the actual artwork. So when I take a photograph on the street or in a bar, I'll take it with the idea in mind that it could be potentially a subject for a painting. And I do have a file. I call it Gary Pearson art photographs. And basically the art photographs means I'm not going to show them as art objects. They'll be just there for source material for painting. So I do go back through them, and it doesn't matter to me if a photograph was taken in 2000. If I'm on a certain stream of thought or looking at a certain artist, in a book or something, and I have an idea that I would like to paint something similar, then I'll go to my file and see what I can haul out and use it to photograph for that purpose. As for my future travel plans, I'm happy to say that I booked a flight to Hamburg and I'm leaving mid-November. I have a residency at Friesa, and it takes me through the end of the calendar year. So I'm excited about that, finally to get away. And it'll
Yeah.
come with an exhibition that'll be shown in December. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wonderful. Congratulations. That sounds
Yeah.
very exciting.
Yeah, I know. I'm just chomping at the bit to go someplace.
Oh, I can only imagine. Well, I know I said that was the last question, but I have one more that came in from Connor, and it's a question that I was wondering as well. So he says, "Hi, Gary. Thanks for elaborating on the body of work from your Gallery Jones show. Curious what one piece of advice you would give to young artists who are just starting their BFA."
Well, hi, Connor. Yeah, I would say the best piece of advice I could get is, like when you go from prof to prof to class, you're getting a lot of stuff thrown at you that's becomes almost like a Campbell's soup, and you have to learn how to sort things out, and not just to make your assignments and make your grade, but actually to make something more of your education. And my best advice is to actually talk to your profs, and if there's a certain angle that you might have that you feel is germane to you in answering a problem or an assignment, if you have assignments that you're tasked with, to run it by your prof and just say, look, I like this idea, but I want to come at it from this angle. It's not seeking permission so much as license to be who you are. One thing you never want to forget as a student coming into first year of BFA studies is that you come with a life already lived, and you can't begin to think that you're starting over. You're not. You're just adding to an already full history of all kinds of experiences, cultural, artistic, personal, even pedagogical, if you go back to your high school days and this sort of thing. So you're going to leave a lot of stuff behind, but you have to start taking on more personal responsibility and get through it without becoming a slave to someone else's ideas.
Very good advice. It's important to stay authentic.
Yeah.
All right, well, I will wrap things up there. Thank you so much for joining us, Gary, and thanks again for answering all of our questions and giving us a bit of insight into your work and your studio life. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and I'll just quickly mention that the exhibition a year from now that Gary's work is featured in is up until November 21st here at the gallery. And we do have another lecturer in this lecture series, Jay Bundy Johnson, who will be joining us on November 18th. So if you're around, be sure to check that out as well. All right.
Thank you, Victoria. And
Yes,
thank
absolutely.
you for everybody joining in.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.